Thank you.
Kia ora.
Speaker.
The Honourable Nanaia Mahuta.
Things most definitely have to change in the care system for our children. In fact, members across the House will know and understand acutely what the harsh impact of children being uplifted from state care has caused to families. In my constituency alone, we have numerous cases where the current system has failed the child and their whānau. However, are we there yet with this bill? We have to ask the question. I don't think so. We're not there yet, because if we look at the statistics to see 60% of children who are uplifted are Māori, you would want to see the type of legislation that gives greater recognition to the things that will ensure the care and protection of Māori children in a way that will lead to long-term integration back into their whānau settings. Why is this important? Because we know, and my colleague Jacinda Ardern has pointed to the research, when a child is connected to their whakapapa, their culture, their language, their identity, their place of belonging, then their opportunity to move forward can be so much more enhanced. So what are the barriers? Well, some of the barriers are legislative and many are operational. That's given. And I think during the select committee process we will see some quite thoughtful, insightful submissions who will provide the committee with ample context to be able to argue in favour of making explicit in the legislation a provision and a preference towards kin care. And that's really what we're debating here. There are numerous aspects of the bill which I think the committee will consider and see the benefits in, such as the voice of the child being provided for in the recommendations of what is in their best interests. However, when you think about getting the balance of interests right and making the decision, who makes the decision, that is where context will matter, and that is where the legislation and what is written in the bill will absolutely be critical. And we would argue that ensuring that there is recognition at the front end in the legislation of kin care as a matter of equal priority to all those other aspects, then observation should be put in that to that recommendation. The other aspect is on information and data sharing. Now, it seems to me at a first reading, albeit a first reading, this will be a very challenging area, but necessary if you want to make the best decisions for a child where there could be multiple agencies involved in offering information to the child and the whānau, then information sharing, data collection is absolutely necessary. You only need to look at the Family Safety Network and how that operates, and also the child safety teams and the amount of information gathered from various agencies and providers to be able to say, okay, what can we all do together to ensure this child is, the options around care for this child is better strengthened. However, I want to come back to the germane issue, and it is a matter that Meteria Turai raised in her question to the Minister of Māori Development. And that is, at the heart of this bill, if we're trying to turn around and make fundamental change to improve lifetime outcomes for Tamariki Māori, then greater recognition of those aspects of a child's context matters. She alluded to the Māori Women's Welfare League Waitangi Tribunal claim and the issue of rangatiratanga. Well, at the heart of mana is rangatiratanga. And I'm asking the question, certainly of the Māori Party, what are the benefits of sitting around the table if the government's ignored any advice that might have been given to them about a fundamental issue hinging off the Treaty of Waitangi, recognition of mana, rangatiratanga, but the interests of the child, these 60% of children who have been uplifted. I'm looking forward to the contribution of the member, because if the Māori Party have been sitting around the table and they've been totally ignored on this front, then absolutely we should be concerned, because those interests that have been advocated by Māori social workers, social providers out there in our community, even iwi providers, my own iwi who are in this space right now, signed an MOU with the government, have concerns about this bill. There has been inadequate consultation. The Minister presented the architecture of the bill to the iwi Leaders Forum. There was some trepidation about whether or not it would achieve what she said it would achieve. In fact, there's probably been quite a high level of concern about the lack of consultation, not just with iwi leaders, but with those organisations who fundamentally want to be in the space of caring for our tamariki. Those people who work at the front line, those people who have experience in family group conferences, those Māori social workers who know intimately all the different aspects of trying to make the best decision for children so that they don't remain in non-kin care but actually can migrate back to their whānau. And these are the things that we're concerned about. Pua o te atatu. And when John Rangihau, who used to be an early Māori welfare officer, that went to the University of Waikato, was commandeered back to advise the Minister of Māori Affairs at the time, absolutely focused on health, absolutely focused on identity and these aspects to do with well-being. Pua o te atatu provided a number of opportunities for the government of the day to think in a different context about getting things right. Mātua whāngai emerged out of Pua o te atatu. The issues around the early settings for state care and how we approach that, and recognising whānau hapu and iwi and care models emerged from Pua o te atatu. In fact, totally revamping the social welfare system to make greater provision for, at its time, a more targeted approach where all its genesis can be linked back to Pua o te atatu. But what we've seen is a systemic non-recognition of the intent of that early report, and I'll leave the rest of it for other colleagues to comment on. My point being that if this legislation is designed to help and support and reverse the high numbers of Māori children in state care to be better positioned or better put into care models that will have long-term gain, then we cannot ignore and deny the need for whānau kin care models to be prevalent within the way the legislation is written, but also within the way that we support those models that are out there now working. And I heard the member previous to me speak about the social investment model and the new procurement approach. Now, if this is code for being able to support preventative solutions for care for children, which it may well be, then I would put this on the table. Iwi providers who are currently in this space are identifying that the front end of the service is where you need to invest if you're going to go for long-term solutions. The funding doesn't follow the intent. And right now, all of that responsibility is being borne through the innovation and the care and concern that iwi want to have within this space. Now, I pointed to this issue in the previous debate on a SIFS bill and said to the Minister that if there was genuine consideration of the evaluation coming out of those early iwi-based care models, then absolutely they'd be looking to see how preventative care can be better supported. It's unclear in this legislation. Mr. Speaker, I want to finally come back to whether or not the bill actually will fix the biggest challenge that we have, which is far too many tamariki in state care, far too many Māori tamariki in state care. I don't think we're there yet. It does need to go to Select Committee, and it does need to get a full hearing. It's going to be really important the way in which the Select Committee entertains aspects of this bill which fundamentally look at a different service delivery model. All that said, if the bill doesn't provide in some shape or form a preference towards iwi hapu whānau care models, then I think we're leaving it to chance. And this is what I would say. If we think any government department will, within its own good conscience, recognise the things that we're saying must be written into legislation, we're dreaming, absolutely dreaming. If we don't make provisions specific that kin care matters, it needs to be considered alongside those other aspects, the voice of the child, the role of the whānau, the ability to support services. On balance, all those things considered together, then the best decision can be made. But you have to be explicit in the legislation. I support the contribution of my colleague Jacinda Ardern and the explanation as to why we can't support this bill at the first reading. We would urge people to be involved in debate. We would urge the government to look at the Waitangi Tribunal claim and what has been expressed as a result of a number of contributions to the forum hui whakatupu, but other than that, other areas as well. We would urge the government also to consult with those iwi who are involved in this care provision space because they are creating the innovation and the practice model to ensure that our kids are better cared for. Kia ora.